It's pretty clear Miami needs to make a trade right now, dropping 8 out of their last 10 games through the month of December. We're going to dive into some more trade rumors that could potentially help bolster Miami's roster on this Thursday's episode of your Heat Latest on FanArc. Thanks so much for joining us this Christmas. I'm Sam Shapiro. If you haven't already, drop a like on this video and, of course, subscribe to our channel. We've got great content you won't want to miss all right here Monday through Friday. And could we potentially see real, concrete trade rumors for whether it's Giannis Antetokounmpo, another superstar, or other assets that could just help Miami get out of the hole they've dug themselves in through this month of December right now come to fruition before the trade deadline this February? I certainly hope so, because this month of December has just been a major disappointment in comparison to how we've seen Miami get off starting this regular season in comparison to pretty much that 140-point performance they put on against the Clippers earlier this month. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that we will potentially see more trade rumors heat up surrounding the Greek Freak come January, because I just think obviously getting closer to the trade deadline, Antetokounmpo clearly showing some sort of friction that he wants to explore another option playing somewhere else. Obviously, he would have to request a trade, I think, because Milwaukee is ultimately going to want to bolster the strength of their roster, being an under 500 team in the Eastern Conference right now. Milwaukee's not going to make a trade unless they're ultimately boosting the strength of their roster, but they're probably not going to be more in favor of going for a trade like that unless Giannis clearly voices that he wants out. And there's a report from Mark Stein that's suggesting that maybe next month we could kind of see some concrete rumors really start to heat up. He said, quote, "No matter how many times Giannis or anyone associated with the Bucks attempts to convince the public that there's no active trade discussions involving him, you still routinely hear a team or two or three out there express their belief that they expect that to change come January," end quote. And I think obviously Miami has put their name in the bidding to win the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. They haven't, put up the bat signal, I feel like, in that regard. But obviously being one of the main teams that it's being reported about that would potentially be interested in striking some sort of deal to acquire the former two-time MVP to come to South Beach, it's definitely a promising thing. And to see this kind of come out definitely makes me think that Miami could be one of those teams that's in the mix once the final details are being polished in and out. But ultimately, if you're Miami, do you kind of have to look at this? Are you looking at this situation like, do you make a trade or do you just sit with what you got? Giannis or bust? And I think if you're trying to win an NBA championship, he is the only superstar, or at least out of all the superstars I've talked about potentially making a solid case for joining Miami's roster. He definitely makes the most convincing one, just because, again, already got a championship to his name, actually put Milwaukee under an umbrella of success during his time playing there. And if he were to come to Miami and play with Bam Adebayo and Norman Powell, as we've talked about, some of the mock trades on this channel would mainly feature Tyler Hero, Andrew Wiggins, and probably Kel'el Ware, I definitely think that team makes a more convincing argument to make a finals run and sit atop the mountain once the regular season's all said and done, in comparison to getting a guy like John Morant or James Harden or maybe even Kawhi Leonard. But I just think that it might also be worth Miami's best interest to wait towards the trade deadline when there's a little bit more pressure to make a big blockbuster move like that, because we're also looking at Antetokounmpo being injured. And I've talked about on the channel here too, if he's not going to be a confident option that you can rely on to be healthy in the roster right now, it might not be worth giving up a lot of those assets or that talent really that could contribute to the ultimate success of the Miami Heat. So drop in the comments if you think Giannis or bust. Should Miami try to make a trade before the deadline to acquire the superstar, or if they should just sit pretty with what they've got right now. I personally don't think they should in terms of staying put with what they've got. I think they do definitely need to make some sort of trade, but in terms of who you're going to trade, I think any package that you're looking at needs to, at this point in time, be or at least including Andrew Wiggins. We talked about this offseason. We were hoping that Andrew Wiggins was going to fit into this Miami Heat team comfortably, was going to bolster the success of this team. Before Norman Powell, it was looking like he was one of the more confident veteran options that was going to be contributing. And we saw glimmers of that at the beginning of this season when Miami was a top 5 team in the conference. But now over this month of December, we've really seen him kind of regress. And if you're going to be trading for Antetokounmpo, or at least trying to make a compelling package for the Greek Freak, this Milwaukee team has already voiced that they've wanted some sort of interest in him, or has had some sort of interest in acquiring him at some point in time. So it could help in terms of trying to leverage a deal for an asset Milwaukee would want that they would think would make their team better if you're going to help bring in a guy that could ultimately change how this Miami team looks in comparison to being a playoff contender, changing over to then being a finals contender type of team. But I think you have to include Wiggins in some sort of package just because homie has just really been struggling, I think. With Wiggins on the court for Miami, their net rating, negative 2.8. With Wiggins off the court, Miami's net rating 4.6. It's definitely a major difference in terms of the success of when Wiggins is on and off the court for this Miami team. Now, when you look at the starting 5, not including Hero, of Bam, Ware, Powell, and Davion Mitchell, got a negative 48.9 rating, and I believe the roughly 27 minutes where that isn't the case. And then with Wiggins in that lineup, they go down to a negative 15. I mean, again, Wiggins I would not say is the main factor or the only reason why Miami has struggled over the month of December in these games, but he's clearly not helping the situation. He's definitely not making it a lot better or positive for Miami, at least in comparison to how this Heat team was playing in the beginning of the year. So I think he definitely needs to be included in some sort of trade package that Miami is going to at least take that avenue and going about. And I think if also you're this Miami team, if you don't take that Giannis or bust type of approach, obviously, as I just said, you need to include him in some sort of deal. But what assets could you pretty much just get straight up for Andrew Wiggins if, a Ja Morant or Antetokounmpo sweepstakes requires throwing in a guy like Khalil Ware or Tyler Hero, or more talent that the 305 would be willing to cough up? Because again, as I mentioned, bringing in Ja Morant for Wiggins and a multitude of guys coming off the bench, or, Wiggins or Hero, might not necessarily get Miami over the hump. Or I definitely think they have the potential to be a finals contender, but not as convincing as if Antetokounmpo was going to come on this team, where I think they're almost nearly a shoo-in to at least make the conference finals, have a very good argument to make the NBA finals, solid chance to win the championship with that defensive anchor in the front court in Antetokounmpo and Adebayo. But Ja Morant, even with Tyler Hero and Norman Powell on that roster, I don't necessarily think that's as much of a strong, or I don't think that necessarily makes a stronger argument for this team to win a championship at this point in time right now. I just don't. Just defensively, I don't like how that in the starting 5 would look in comparison to the front court options you could potentially have. And that might be a hot take for some, but that's just personally how I feel. Got off the beaten horse a little bit, but if you can't include Wiggins without giving up a multitude of assets you don't want to give up to go along with Wiggins in some sort of package, what other deal could you look at? Because Milwaukee obviously voicing interest in Wiggins over the course of, as of recently, definitely is great, but it almost was under the lens of pairing up Wiggins with Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner. And if you can't get Antetokounmpo at that point, it almost looks like a bust type of scenario for Miami if you're Giannis, if you're looking at it from a Giannis or bust type of situation. So I think you have to look at it in one of two ways. You could potentially trade Wiggins to the Bucks for Kyle Kuzma, or you could form some sort of trade package with the Lakers and acquiring Hachimura as well as some draft assets as well. Even if at that point, if it's just Andrew Wiggins, then you're not really giving up a lot of the more premier players in Miami's roster, and it ultimately might not be as big of an asking price if you're not convinced that going for that superstar trade sweepstakes is going to make you a title contender. Now, if Miami were to trade for Kyle Kuzma, they would also hopefully get a 2026 first-round pick and Kuzma in exchange for Wiggins. And again, that could be good for Milwaukee because they'd be pairing up a forward that they would think would suit their team a little bit better than Kuzma with Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner. But Miami ultimately would get Kyle Kuzma and save money in getting rid of Wiggins. I mean, right now, Kuzma's making roughly $19 million. Wiggins is supposed to make roughly $28 million. So you're saving money. You're still getting a quality forward that could potentially be a guy in the rotation that could help in some way, shape, or form, and potentially play even better than how Andrew Wiggins has fit into this lineup over the course of this regular season so far. If you don't really like how that looks, then you could maybe go to the Lakers, trade for Hachimura and Gabe Vincent to go around with a 2031 first-round pick, and then if you're Miami, throw in Drew Smith, because Drew Smith, obviously, I feel like has been playing quality minutes for this Miami team, but Gabe Vincent could kind of at least be another guy in the backcourt to work alongside Yaku Chones as he hopefully gets more minutes in this rotation. Because I think if he at least gets more burn for this Miami Heat team, we could potentially see him being an option that Miami goes to in their lineup more, hopefully accelerating his development a little bit more. And then you're getting Gabe Vincent, who's already proved to be a solid player in Miami's rotation before. I'm not saying Gabe Vincent is just as good as Andrew Wiggins, but at least you're getting a quality forward and a guard that you can fit into this backcourt that you know will be a solid fit in comparison to maybe potentially with the Bucks deal, a better forward that may or may not work out. So drop in the comments what you think if Miami looking at potential deals with the Bucks or the Lakers who were previously interested in acquiring Wiggins, trying to see what worth you could pretty much just get straight up for him if the whole Antetokounmpo sweepstakes thing doesn't necessarily work out and Miami doesn't think that making a blockbuster deal like that before the trade deadline could ultimately put them in the driver's seat or in a better position than they're in right now to bring home an NBA championship. But personally, I would like to see Miami try to do that just because I don't think the talent on this roster right now is going to get it done without at least an all-NBA first team or second team type of player in this lineup. I just don't. But drop in the comments if you agree with me or not, or what kind of trade acquisitions you think Miami needs to make before the trade deadline to help bolster them back to the type of basketball they were playing at the beginning of this season, because they've dropped their 8 of last 10 games, and it's getting real tough to watch. That's going to do it for today's episode of your Heat Latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We've got great daily content Monday through Friday, and you don't want to miss it right here on the channel. Thanks again so much for joining us this Christmas. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a great day.